The world exploded. Tempest Prime Aldrich Brelk's vision went white as another flak burst detonated meters from the drop ship's hull. The craft lurched sideways, throwing him hard against his restraint harness. Through the ringing in his ears, he heard someone retching, probably Comptner, the kid's third combat drop and his first into a hot zone like this. 30 seconds. The pilot's voice crackled through the Vox, barely audible over the screaming engines and the continuous hammer of anti-aircraft fire. Landing zones compromised. We're putting you down 2 clicks south of planned insertion. Brelk clicked his Vox bead twice in acknowledgement, then turned to check his squad. 9 faces looked back at him through the red emergency lighting, each one a story written in scars and determination. Sergeant Renz was muttering something under his breath. Not prayers, Brelk knew, but the names of every soldier he'd lost over 15 years of service. The acid burns covering the left side of his face pulled tight as he finished with, "And may you all be waiting for me at the Emperor's side." It was his pre-combat ritual, as essential to him as checking his weapon. "Oi, young blood," Trooper Dane called out to Comptner, his gravelly voice carrying the weight of 3 decades in uniform. "You finished blessing that power pack yet, or you planning to kiss it too?" Comptner looked up from where he'd been obsessively checking his lasgun's charge indicator. "Just making sure it's fine, boy," Dane interrupted, not unkindly. "Checked it yourself 6 times, watched you do it. What you need to be checking is that." He tapped his temple. "Keep your head right, your weapon will follow." The dropship banked hard, and through the tiny viewport, Brelk caught sight of their escort fighters. 3 lightnings in echelon formation, already scarred from battle. The lead fighter simply ceased to exist, replaced by an expanding cloud of burning promethium and shrapnel. Through the fireball came something that shouldn't have been able to fly. A helldrake, its mechanical wings spread wide, brass scales glowing with internal fire. The demon engine's cry penetrated the armored hull, a sound that made Comptner's hands shake and even made Renz pause in his recitation. "Sweet throne," Trooper Udale breathed, the squad's medic gripping his Medicae kit like a talisman. "That's not in any briefing I've ever." "Briefings are wishes," Trooper Trells cut in, his clipped Mordian accent making each word precise. He was checking his plasma gun's coolant levels with the same calm he'd displayed checking provisions. "Reality is what tries to kill you." The remaining fighters engaged the Helldrake, las cannons stabbing out in coordinated strikes. One got too close. The demon engine's jaws clamped down on its cockpit, crushing it like a ration tin before tossing the wreckage aside. They hit hard. Harder than any training drop. Harder than the insertion on Kalos 7 that had left half of them with compression fractures. The rear ramp was already dropping when Brelk heard the distinctive whistle of incoming artillery. They scattered across the landing pad in practice patterns, each trooper covering their assigned sectors. The air hit Brelk like a physical force, thick with metallic ash that immediately clogged his respirator's first filter layer, forcing the backup to engage. His helmet's display showed external temperature at 43 degrees above baseline, with toxicity readings that would kill an unprotected human in minutes. Behind them, their dropship was trying to lift off when the artillery shell found it. The pilot almost managed to recover, fighting the damaged bird with everything he had. Then the engine exploded, and physics won. The dropship plummeted into a manufactorum half a kilometer away, the explosion painting the ash-choked sky orange. "Rally Point Alpha," Brelk commanded, already moving. "Weapons free on any hostile contact." What had once been an orderly complex of workshops was now a twisted nightmare. Buildings folded in on themselves, metal flowing like water, then freezing in impossible shapes. The corruption wasn't just physical. Even looking at some of the structures made Brelk's eyes water, his brain refusing to process what he saw. Sergeant Renz worked the access panel, fingers flying over the runecoder. "These codes better be worth what that Mechanicus agent died getting us," he muttered. "Contact, 3 o'clock, Trells called out, plasma gun already humming to life. The cultists came out of the ash like a tide of madness. Dozens at first, then hundreds, their faces hidden behind masks that looked like they'd been welded directly to flesh. They moved wrong, not quite in unison, but connected somehow. As they got closer, Brelk could see why. Thin filaments of flesh ran between them, pulsing with dark fluid. "Hold fire," Brelk ordered, watching them come. "Let them cluster." "Sir," Trooper Mordaunt said quietly, his heavy Cadian drawl stretching the word. "Those cables between 'em, seen something like that on Hydra Tertius. 15 meters, Trooper Landstone reported, the oldest member of the squad after Dane, his voice steady despite the horror approaching. The first volley was perfect, concentrated Lars fire cutting through the filaments. Wherever the connections severed, cultists collapsed like puppets with cut strings. But there were so many, and the ones behind simply climbed over the fallen. Young Compton's shots were precise, each one center mass, but his breathing was too fast. Dane, firing from beside him, spoke without looking away from his targets. "Breathe with the shots, boy. In, squeeze out. Make it a rhythm." "Hatches open," Renz announced. They fell back by pairs, textbook perfect, each team covering the other's movement. The last cultist fell 3 meters from the hatch, mask shattering to reveal features that might have once been beautiful, but were now frozen in an expression of ecstatic madness. The shaft descended into absolute darkness. As they rappelled down, their helmet lights created a cylinder of visibility that ended in nothing below. The Auspex readings were confused, showing interference patterns that shifted every few seconds. "Anyone else hearing that?" Udale asked quietly. They all heard it, a distant sound like metal breathing, rhythmic and wrong. The maintenance corridor at the bottom had been transformed. The walls curved at angles, and the devotional scripts to the Omnissiah had been overwritten with chaos symbols. They heard them before they saw them, metal footsteps, but wrong, accompanied by a sound like weeping. The corrupted servitors came into view, and Compton physically recoiled. These had once been battle servitors, but their transformation went beyond mere mechanical corruption. Human faces pushed out from their metal shells, each mouth moving in silent screams. Behind them walked 3 iron warriors. The first had become something between marine and machine, his armor fused with his flesh in a seamless blend that wept oil and blood in equal measure. The second carried what had once been a bolter, but was now partially organic, its ammunition feed replaced with something that pulsed like an artery. The third, clearly the leader, wore armor so ancient that it predated the heresy itself. His helmet had been modified with additional sensory apparatus, giving him the appearance of a mechanical spider, and trophies from 10,000 years of war hung from his belt. Dog tags from guard regiments, Rosarius beads from long-dead priests, a child's toy that had been dipped in gold. "Renz," Brelk whispered. "Remember Kalos 7, the Manufactorum Gambit," Renz replied, understanding immediately. "That's what killed Kess." "Won't be us," Brelk said with more confidence than he felt. "Trell's on my mark, full power to the second warrior. Everyone else, concentrate on the servitors. Leave the leader to me." "Sir," Dane said quietly, "that's suicide and you know it." "That's an order." The ambush was perfect in execution and immediately went wrong. The servitors reacted faster than should have been possible, their multiple faces all turning toward the hidden positions simultaneously. The Iron Warriors were already moving, diving for cover as their leader bellowed a single word in the dark tongue that made reality flinch. Lars bolts crossed with bolt shells in a deadly web. The servitors advanced despite taking multiple hits, their corrupted forms somehow more resilient than physics should allow. One fired a stream of projectiles that aged everything they touched. Landstone barely dove aside in time, but the rounds caught his leg armor. The ceramite held, but his leg inside began to wither, aging decades in seconds. "Medic," someone shouted. Trells rose from cover, plasma guns screaming. The Iron Warrior's leader saw him, raised his combi bolter, but Renz was already moving, tackling Trells aside as bolt rounds detonated where he'd been. The plasma blast went wide, vaporizing a section of wall and revealing ancient mechanisms behind it. The Iron Warrior with the organic bolter advanced, the weapon shrieking as it fired. Each shell was different, acid razor clouds, things that burrowed through armor and then exploded. "Crack grenades," Brelk commanded. The explosions were deafening in the confined space. One servitor came apart, its components still trying to complete their last orders, even scattered across the floor. But the Iron Warrior with fused armor used the smoke as cover, charging through impossibly fast. He grabbed Haraway before anyone could react. The trooper had 1 second to make a decision and made it, triggered his demo charge at point-blank range. The explosion cracked the traitor's chest plate and sent both flying. Udale was already moving, but even from where he stood, Brelk could see it was bad. Haraway's armor had multiple breaches, blood pooling beneath him. The fight devolved into close-quarters madness. Dane's flamer turned the corridor into an inferno. Burning servitors continued advancing, creating a scene from an ecclesiarchy depiction of hell. Young Comptner stood his ground as one reached for him, emptying his power pack point-blank, then driving his combat knife into what might have been an eye. The blade went in easy, but pulling it out released a spray of fluid that hissed where it hit his armor. Brelk found himself facing the leader. "You fight well for mortals," the Iron Warrior said, his voice a synthesis of organic and mechanical tones that suggested vast weariness. "Tell me, do you know why you're really here?" "To stop you," Brelk replied, parrying the first strike with his power sword. The impact sent shockwaves up his arms. "To die for lies," the Iron Warrior corrected, striking again. "Your Tech-Dominus doesn't carry SDC patterns. He carries something far more valuable, the location of every hidden archive on 17 Forge worlds. We're not here to destroy. We're here to reclaim what was stolen from us 10 millennia ago." The words were meant to distract, and they almost worked. Brelk barely got his sword up in time to block a strike that would have split him in half. Behind them, Trells finally got a clear shot. The plasma blast took the organic bolter warrior full in the chest. His armor held for a moment before failing catastrophically, but his dying act was to trigger something that sent his weapon into overdrive, firing randomly as it died with its master. The leader saw his battle brother fall, and something changed in his stance, disappointment rather than rage. "Predictable," he said, then did something Brelk didn't expect. He stepped back, lowering his weapon. "You've won this engagement. Temporarily, but you cannot win what comes next." Dark energy crackled around his armor as he called upon ruinous powers. The temperature dropped 20 degrees instantly, frost forming on the walls. Reality thinned, and through the gaps, things looked through. Eyes that shouldn't exist, watching with hungry interest. "Now," Brelk shouted. Every squad member who could still fight opened fire simultaneously. The ancient armor, already weakened by 10 millennia of war, and held together as much by dark faith as by ceramite, finally gave way. Multiple systems failed in cascade. The traitor staggered, tried to speak one last word. It might have been a name, then toppled backward with a crash that shook dust from the ceiling. The last Iron Warrior, the one with fused armor who had survived Haraway's sacrifice, looked at his fallen brothers. Instead of attacking, he reached down and pulled something from the leader's belt, a small device that looked like a data slate made of brass and bone. "This isn't over," he said, his voice a horrible mixture of human vocal cords and vox grill. "The architect will want to know about you." He backed away into the shadows and was gone before anyone could pursue. "Let him go," Brelk ordered, breathing heavily. "Check the wounded." The cost had been high. Haraway was unconscious, his vitals barely registering on Udale's Medikey Auspex. Landstone's aged leg was useless, the muscle and bone beneath the armor having aged to the point of brittleness. Comptner had dozens of small wounds from the acidic spray, his armor's auto-sealant working overtime. But they were alive. "Sir," Wren said, standing over the fallen leader's body. "Look at this." The data slate the Iron Warrior had dropped in death was still active, showing a partial schematic of the Forge complex. But it wasn't current, it was old, maybe from the original construction, and it showed things that weren't on any official map. "Evacuation tunnels," Brelk breathed. Haraway was right. They're not just sealed, they're hidden. "There's more," Wrens continued, manipulating the device carefully. "Guard patrol routes, defensive positions, even some kind of. Emperor preserve us, is that a transit system?" "The old Magrail network," Mordaunt said, looking over his shoulder. My grandfather worked on something similar on Cadia before it fell, if it's still functional. We could move faster than on foot, Brelk finished. Maybe even evacuate civilians. A sound echoed from deeper in the complex, rhythmic hammering, like a massive heart beating. What in the Emperor's name is that? Udale asked. Nothing good, Dane replied, checking his flamer's promethium reserves. In my experience, when chaos makes something that big, it's usually about to ruin everyone's day. They carried Haraway on an improvised stretcher made from their equipment webbing, moving deeper into the complex. The architecture became increasingly wrong the further they went. The rhythmic hammering grew louder, accompanied now by other sounds, screaming metal, hissing steam, and underneath it all, something that might have been singing. Contact ahead, Comptner reported, and Brelk was pleased to note the young trooper's voice was steadier now. In a chamber that had once been a maintenance shrine, they found tech priests. But these weren't corpses or servitors. They were alive, armed, and very much fighting back. They had converted industrial equipment into weapons, turning peaceful tools into instruments of war. A mining laser meant for cutting ceramite, carved through advancing cultists. A gravity manipulation unit designed for moving heavy machinery was crushing enemies into compact puddles of meat and metal. Leading them was a tech priest who moved with surprising grace despite extensive augmentation. Half her body was mechanical, but the organic half burned with righteous fury. Her mechadendrites wielded various weapons simultaneously. A plasma cutter here, an arc welder there, and what looked like a volkite charger that had been modified beyond standard specifications. Militarum forces, she called out, her voice a perfect blend of organic and mechanical tones. Identify yourself. Tempest Prime Brelk, Tempest Squad Crimson-Eagles, Brelk replied. We're here for Tech-Dominus Pravor. The tech priestess laughed, a sound like bells ringing through a vox grill. You're about 6 hours too late for a simple extraction, Tempesta. I'm tech priestess Octavia Kell, and if you want Pravor, you'll need to help us first. We're pinned down by. Her words were cut off as the wall exploded inward. Through the breach came more iron warriors, but these were different from the ones they'd fought earlier. These moved with a precision that went beyond their usual discipline, their actions perfectly coordinated. Servitorized, Octavia spat with disgust. Abomination unto the Omnissiah. The squad took defensive positions alongside the tech priests. The combination of their disciplined last fire and the tech priests' exotic weapons created a deadly killing field. But the servitorized iron warriors kept coming, advancing without regard for casualties. How many of your people are left? Brelk asked Octavia between bursts of fire. 937, down from 8,000, she replied, her volkite charger turning another servitorized marine into superhot ash. Each one carries irreplaceable knowledge. Some have data patterns dating back to the Great Crusade. We found evidence of old evacuation tunnels, Brelk said, and possibly a functional mag rail system. Octavia's optical sensors whirred as they focused on him. The deep transit network, it was sealed after. Wait, how do you know about that? We found this. He showed her the data slate. She studied it for a moment, then made a sound that might have been surprise or possibly hope. This is Archaeotech data encoding, pre-imperial. Where did you? She looked at the fallen iron warriors. They knew, of course they knew. They were here when it was built. Another explosion, closer this time. Through the smoke came something massive, an obliterator, its form constantly shifting between weapon configurations. Fall back to the shrine, Octavia commanded. All units, Convergence Protocol 7. They retreated in good order, the tech priests laying down covering fire with weapons that Brelk suspected weren't entirely sanctioned by Mars. The obliterator pursued, its multiple weapons firing continuously, turning the corridor into a kill zone. They reached the primary manufactorum after another hour of running battles. The massive space had been transformed into something that defied perception. The ceiling rippled like water, occasionally dropping to reveal glimpses of other places, other times. In the center, a massive construction was taking shape, part machine, part flesh, part something that existed in dimensions the human mind couldn't fully process. The architect's work, Octavia said with disgust. They're building a demon engine, but not just any engine. This is meant to be a knowledge thief, something that can rip information directly from cogitator banks and living minds alike. Through the vast space, they could see work crews of enslaved humans and servitors laboring under Iron Warrior's supervision. And there, on a raised platform near the center, stood their objective. Tech-Dominus Pravor was more machine than man, but even among the heavily augmented priesthood of Mars, he stood out. Multiple mechadendrites writhed from his back, each performing different tasks simultaneously. His head was a dome of polished brass, studded with optical sensors that tracked independently. He was surrounded by Iron Warriors, but seemed to be working not under duress but with purpose. Is he cooperating with them? Compner asked, shocked. No, Octavia said firmly. He's subverting their work. Look closer, every component he touches, he's introducing microfractures, flaws that won't show until the engine is activated. He's ensuring it will destroy itself. We need to get to him, Brelk said. Impossible with current force disposition, Octavia replied. But there's another way, she gestured to a tech priest beside her. Hadron, show them. The tech priest projected a hololithic map of the Manufactorum. The Magrail tunnels run beneath the entire complex. One surfaces inside the control shrine, but the tunnels have been sealed for 3 centuries, and we don't know what condition they're in, or what might be living in them now, Dane added grimly. It's our best option, Brelk decided. Octavia, can you get your people ready to evacuate? Give me 30 minutes and a clear route, she replied. They descended into the Magrail tunnels through a hidden access point that required 3 different security overrides to open. The air that rushed out was ancient, carrying the scent of rust. The Magrail cars were still there, frozen on their tracks like metal coffins. Most were empty, but some contained cargo that had been waiting 300 years for delivery, components for machines that no longer existed, supplies for workers who had long since died. Tracks clear for about 2 kilometers, Mordaunt reported, checking his auspex. Then there's some kind of massive heat signature blocking the way. They advanced carefully, helmet lights creating pools of visibility in the oppressive darkness. The walls were covered in something that might have been fungus. It pulsed slightly when their lights hit it, recoiling from the illumination. Young Compner was on point when they found the first body. It was an Iron Warrior, but ancient, his armor bearing heraldry from the Great Crusade. He had been torn apart from the inside, his chest cavity burst open like rotten fruit. What could do that to an Astartes? Compner asked, his earlier steadiness wavering. Something that's had 300 years to grow strong in the dark, Renz replied. They found more bodies as they advanced. Iron warriors, cultists, even what might have been loyalist space marines, though the armor was too damaged to identify the chapter. All showed the same type of damage, killed from within. The heat signature turned out to be a massive organic mass blocking the tunnel. It pulsed with internal warmth, and things moved beneath its surface, shapes that might have been faces or hands or something worse. It's a chaos spawn, Udale said quietly, but I've never seen one this big. Because it's not one, Octavia's voice crackled through the vox. It's multiple, all fused together. The Iron Warriors must have been experimenting with warp flesh bonding. How do we get past it? Brelk asked. You don't, she replied. You go through it, uploading weak points to your auspex now. The data showed vulnerability nodes throughout the mass, places where the fusion was imperfect, where concentrated fire might split it apart. This is insane, Lansdowne muttered, his aged leg making him lean heavily on Udale. This is Tuesday, Dane corrected, checking his flamer. Compner, you stick with me. We're going to teach you the fine art of burning things that shouldn't exist. They opened fire simultaneously, targeting the weak points. The mass screamed, expressing agony and rage. It split apart, revealing a passage through its center, but the separated parts were already moving, trying to reform. Run, Brelk commanded. They sprinted through the organic corridor, the walls trying to close in on them. Mordaunt's volley gun chattered continuously, keeping the passage open. Trells fired his plasma gun until warning runes blazed red, indicating imminent overload. They burst through the other side just as the mass reformed behind them, sealing the tunnel. But they had made it through. "Control shrine is above us," Renz reported, checking the schematics. "There's an emergency access ladder. There." The climb was torture for the wounded. Haraway had regained consciousness, but was delirious, muttering about eagles made of fire. Landstone's aged leg barely functioned, requiring Dane and Compner to basically carry him up. They emerged into chaos. The control shrine was under assault. Tech-Dominus Pravor stood at the primary console, mechadendrites flying over controls as he fought a desperate electronic battle against scrapcode invasion. Around him, a handful of tech priests had formed a defensive circle, their weapons running low on ammunition. Attacking them were not just iron warriors, but something worse. A warpsmith, his mechadendrites ending in torture devices that could flay both flesh and data streams. He was systematically breaking through the shrine's defenses, both physical and digital. "About time you arrived," Pravor said, without looking up. "I was beginning to think I'd have to destroy everything myself." "We're here to extract you," Brelk said. "Extraction is no longer the primary objective," Pravor replied. "Preservation of knowledge is. I have irreplaceable data in my cortex implants, but more importantly, I have the locations of every hidden archive on 17 Forge worlds, information the enemy must not obtain." The warpsmith laughed. "You cannot stop what has already begun, Dominus. Your new spheric defenses are failing. In moments, I will have everything in your mind." "No," Octavia said, emerging from the same hatch they'd used. Behind her came tech priests, dozens of them, all armed and ready. "You'll have nothing but death, traitor." The battle erupted with renewed fury. The confined space of the shrine became a close-quarters killing ground. Lars bolts, bolt shells, and more exotic ammunition filled the air. The warpsmith's mechadendrites struck like metal serpents, each one capable of killing with a touch. Young Compner found himself separated from the squad, facing a servitorized iron warrior alone. The enemy raised his bolter, and time seemed to slow. Everything Dane had taught him crystallized in that moment. Breathe with the shot. Trust your training. Fear is just another sensation to be acknowledged and set aside. He fired 3 times, each shot hitting a weak point in the armor's joints. The iron warrior staggered, and Compner moved without thinking, grabbing a fallen tech priest's plasma cutter and driving it up under the traitor's helmet seal. The servitorized marine fell, and Compner realized he wasn't shaking anymore. Across the shrine, Brelk engaged the warpsmith directly. His power sword met the traitor's mechadendrites in a deadly dance, sparks flying with each contact. But he was being pushed back, the warpsmith's inhuman strength overwhelming. Then Renz was there, and Trells, and even wounded Landstone, all firing point blank. The warpsmith's armor sparked and cracked, systems failing. He roared in fury and pain, dark energy crackling around him as he prepared to unleash some terrible warp-spawned attack. Octavia's Volkite charger spoke with finality, the beam of thermal energy catching the warpsmith in the head. His helmet melted, revealing the twisted fusion of flesh and metal beneath before that too was reduced to ash. In the sudden silence that followed, they could hear alarms throughout the complex, evacuation warnings. "The reactor," Pravor said calmly. "I set it to overload 17 minutes ago. We have perhaps 5 minutes before the reaction becomes irreversible." "You did what?" Brelk demanded. "Ensured denial of assets to the enemy," Pravor replied. "However, if Tech Priestess Kell's evacuation plans are accurate, we should be able to extract 63% of critical personnel." 63% isn't good enough," Octavia said firmly. "We save them all or die trying." She moved to the primary console, interfacing directly with the shrine's systems. "There, I've opened all the sealed passages, activated every emergency protocol. The evacuation routes are clear." Through the shrine's windows, they could see tech priests and surviving workers streaming toward exit points. But they could also see iron warriors converging on their position. "They know what we're doing," Mordaunt observed. "Then we hold them here," Brelk decided. "Buy time for the evacuation." "With respect, sir," Sergeant Renz said, "we're down to fumes on ammunition, half the squad is wounded, and there's at least a company of iron warriors out there." Then we'll have to be creative, Brelk replied, then turned to Pravor. That demon engine they're building, can you turn it against them? The Tech-Dominus's optical sensors whirred as they focused on him. That would be tech heresy of the highest order. That would be justice, Octavia countered. They perverted the Omnissiah's designs. We're simply correcting the error. Pravor was quiet for a moment, then his mechadendrites began moving in complex patterns. It will take me 3 minutes to override their control systems. You'll need to hold for that long. Emperor protects, Brelk said, checking his power sword's charge one last time. Positions. They made their stand at the shrine's entrance, using everything they had left. Last packs were shared and redistributed, the wounded propped up where they could still fire, every grenade and demo charge prepared. The Iron Warriors came in force, advancing behind a wall of servitors and cultists. Bolt fire shattered the shrine's ancient windows, filling the air with crystal shards. The defenders fired back with desperate precision, making every shot count. 30 seconds, Pravor announced. An Iron Warrior with a missile launcher stepped into view, targeting the shrine's main support column. Young Comptner didn't think, just acted, sprinting from cover and slamming into him as he fired. The missile went wide, detonating against the ceiling instead. Comptner rolled away as the Iron Warrior tried to grab him, cover fire from Dane's position, keeping the traitor pinned. Done, Pravor shouted. Outside, the massive demon engine shuddered, then turned. Its weapons, meant to harvest knowledge, instead began tearing through the Iron Warrior's ranks. The traitor's advance faltered as they turned to face this new threat. Now, everyone out. They ran through corridors that shook with the approaching reactor overload. Emergency lights bathed everything in red, and the temperature was rising rapidly. Through the Vox, they could hear reports from the evacuation teams. Hundreds of tech priests and workers reaching the landing fields where Mechanicus craft waited. They burst from the complex into the ash-choked air just as the first evacuation barge lifted off. More were loading, tech priests streaming aboard with desperate efficiency. Reactor critical in 60 seconds, someone shouted. The squad threw themselves onto the nearest barge as its void shields powered up. Through the closing ramp, Brelk saw a lone figure standing at the complex entrance, the Iron Warrior with fused armor who had escaped their first encounter. The traitor wasn't trying to flee. He stood there, watching them leave, and in his hand was the brass and bone data slate. He raised it in what might have been a salute or a promise of future vengeance, then turned and walked back into the dying complex. The reactor went critical as their barge reached minimum safe distance. The explosion was visible from orbit, a pillar of nuclear fire that turned night into day and reduced the entire forge complex to glass. In the medical bay of the Mechanicus cruiser, Brelk stood over his wounded. Haraway would live, though he'd need extensive augmetics. Landstone's aged leg had been amputated. Comptner sat quietly, the young soldier who'd started the mission, transformed into a veteran by the crucible of combat. 812, Octavia reported, entering the medical bay. That's how many we saved. Out of 8,000, Brelk said quietly. Out of 0 if you hadn't come, she corrected. And every one of them carries knowledge that can't be replaced. Plasma weapons that can be produced on forge worlds with limited resources. Improved armor compositions, medical treatments that were thought lost. She touched her temple, and Pravor's knowledge lives on. He transmitted copies to 17 of us before the end. The Imperium won't lose what he knew. A data slate chimed, orders from the Departamento Munitorum, court-martial proceedings for violation of primary mission parameters. But another message followed immediately, bearing the seal of the Fabricator General himself. The Mechanicus was intervening, declaring the preservation of 812 critical personnel a strategic victory that superseded the original mission parameters. What will you do now? Octavia asked. Brelk looked at his squad, battered, wounded, but unbroken. What we always do, prepare for the next mission, the next fight. Young Comptner spoke up. The Iron Warrior who escaped, he'll be back, won't he? Probably, Brelk admitted. Good, Comptner said quietly. We owe him for Haraway. Dane clapped the young soldier on the shoulder. Now you're thinking like a Tempester. As the cruiser entered the warp, taking them toward their next battlefield, Brelk allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. They had saved 812 souls, preserved crucial knowledge, and denied the enemy their prize. The Emperor protects, but only those who protect each other would live to serve another day. And somewhere in the galaxy, other battles waited.